Jungle Global University. I welcome all of you for another interesting event of the Quest webinar series.
I know how challenging a time this is to be a student. I know what an incredible campus experience and residential experience that students normally have. Obviously, the pandemic has really changed that. I know there probably are some anxieties about what will happen now as students leave the university or business school gates into the real world, as it were. And what I hope to do today is provide a little bit of optimism and maybe the message that some of what we've been learning through this pandemic, difficult as it has been, may actually help us all thrive and succeed in the world to come. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is really directly with the student body here. What I wanted to talk about really was this idea that if you look at this, I think many of us, maybe before the pandemic hit, this was our vision of maybe a good life, right? This kind of very reflective place. I was on a boat with a friend over the summer, and he has a small boat. So we remember, we stayed overnight in the middle of the sea. This was the English Channel, and this was kind of the view of what things looked like, pretty much. Maybe not quite as beautiful, but not far off this. But of course, what the pandemic, feels like maybe is something more like this. And a couple of times on the journey, we also almost capsized and felt like I can swim. But my kids were with me as well, so I was getting a bit nervous. And I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask everyone today, and maybe we can do this in the Q&A, is just a little bit about who you are and what are you most worried about and hopeful about right now, given all the things that have been happening over the last year. I was just seeing Siddharth's comment in the chat as well about some of the more macro, the environment, etc. as well. Let's move into that. I think that'll be the core of the talk today, to focus on the future. And I think many of us, we were saying at the beginning, are very worried about what happens after the university gates, right? And so what I hope today we can do is spend some time thinking about that future together. And what I'd like to do is challenge us to think a bit differently about that. So let me move on to that point now. And there are 5 things I wanted to share, 5 sort of learnings or lessons, for want of a better word. If you come back with 1 or 2 or 3, I hope it's been a useful session. But I wanted to share all 5 in the spirit of being complete. And you may find some of these might resonate more with you than others. Not normally someone I would quote, but I thought he said something quite interesting, which might relate to some of the things that Gaurav, you mentioned just a few minutes ago. And he said something quite profound. Let me read that out. There are no knowns. These are things that we know. So these are the known knowns. We also know that there are known unknowns. There are things that things out there that we know we don't know, basically. Right? Is this making sense so far? But he went on to say, but there are also unknown unknowns, right? Things we don't know. And what he concluded was this idea that if you look through the share of history in any country, any society, it's these unknown unknowns that have been the most difficult to manage, right? And if you look at what we've been talking about at the beginning of this session, the pandemic, I mean, that must be surely the ultimate unknown unread. Who would have ever imagined we would be wearing masks, be on Zoom like this, everyone would be in their bedrooms, dialing into classes or work. It would be like a science fiction. And maybe some of you watched this film. It's a Hollywood film, Contagion, which was popular a few years ago, but no one thought it would ever be reality, right? So I thought what he said was interesting and wise. And what I want to talk today about is how do we try and sort of face that world of unknown unknowns? As you were saying, Gaurav, I think Tanushree, you also touched on this, that there's a world of uncertainty past these gates. And we can't change that world, but we can change how we approach, how we think about it, and how we act, what I would call wicked problems where there is no easy technical solution. I know I'm at a business school, so I thought I would cite the original quote of the idea of a wicked problem. And this is from a professor at Harvard Business School. And what he says is that, it's not about being difficult or not. It's that wicked problems have a number of causes, that they're tough to describe. There's not a single right answer. And that the normal ways we attack problems or address problems doesn't really work very well for wicked problems. Right? Does this make sense? Just want to check on maybe in the chat. Make sense so far, or shout out?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm a big fan of Adam Grant, and those of you don't really highly recommend. He has a great podcast. He's a professor at Wharton in the US, but he talks about this idea that in our current day, and I think this goes back to what you were saying, Gaurav, at the beginning of the session, that often we think about career success about, what will I be? Will I be, this VP of, finance at this company, or will I be a COO in 20 years and all this kind of stuff? But actually what Grant is saying is that often we're better off thinking, what is the problem we want to try and solve? And sort of, what problem will I dedicate my life to focus on? And my role might change in solving that problem over time. Just the last thing, the next thing just to talk about is this idea of all of us being talent owners, and we're all owners of our own talent. And one of the things that is sort of happened, this is a picture. Can anyone tell me where this train is located? There's a slight clue on if your eyesight is good, I guess, on here, but any guesses here? No? So maybe, if you go for it. California, yeah, great. Who said that? Siddhartha, is it? Yeah, exactly. So this is a train. This goes between places like Palo Alto, which is the heart of Silicon Valley, and San Francisco. It's in Northern California. Exactly right. So what was really interesting, I researched this for the book, was that interesting and very distressing, to be honest, was that what had happened is this station, it's called the Cal train. They were starting to have armed guards at the station. And these guards were often from very poor backgrounds. They're often African Americans or Hispanic community members from the other side of Palo Alto. Palo Alto is a very rich city in some parts of the city, and not so, and very poor in other parts of the city. But the reason they have the armed guards was that a number of young people, often teenagers, were throwing themselves on the tracks. And it got to such a point where there was a real drama in the state around this issue. And what was strange about this was that the children doing this were not from the poorest families at all. The guards were. Instead, they were some of the richest families in America. They were from the top 1% of the country. And what was happening was a sense of real anxiety and a fear of failure. So much so, I was looking at some of the interviews some of the young people they gave to some of the local newspapers. They were terrified of getting a B on a paper, because that would mean they would not get into Stanford. And this kind of absolute craziness was going on. And I just thought it was a really disturbing pattern, right? That they had everything really in every sense. They were very, well-established families. They had, lots of social connections, all of these things. But that anxiousness was meaning they were not able to feel fulfilled and successful in life. And I think that's a real tragedy for our young people to be thinking that way. And this may be a musical hit from perhaps before most people here are born, but this was a group called ABBA, and they had a very famous song about 20, 30 years ago called "The Winner Takes All." And there's a real worry, I think, now in the world we're in, that basically the rewards of any profession, whether it's in industry or consulting or whatever, or life in general, it only goes to a few of us, right? And there's no way for a lot of us all to benefit and thrive in a sector, in a marketplace, in the world at large. And one of the sort of ideas I think that I would really encourage all of us to think about a lot is, how do we try to stand out and be different? And if you look at, I'm sure I forgot to mention entrepreneurship in some of the classes I'm sure some of you are doing, but this is a book called Play Bigger, which is one of the Bibles of Silicon Valley right now. And what the authors did is they looked at companies that really were thriving, attracting lots of VC money, for example, all of these things. And what they found is they were not companies just trying to do the same thing a bit better. They were trying to invent entirely new categories. And this is a company example, but I think it's a very good example for how all of us could be individually, which is about being really, really standing out and taking a position that no one else takes. to like fill a vessel with content or knowledge, but how do we light a fire in our students in a way that they really will love learning and they'll want to keep learning to learn through their lives, which is going to be so important for our future success. And then I think the other thing they do a lot is to really think about how you can stay engaged, as we said before, in whatever you're doing right now, with a view that that engagement can really transfer to other domains you may be involved in. And the last thing was really interesting. There was no ego in the best nurturers of talent. You know, whether the sports coach or the teacher, they saw their role as helping you get to a certain point, and then passing you on to the next place that will nurture your talent. That could be, for example, going from the business school gates to your first job, right? As I did for me, from the Cambridge gates to David Newkirk, who you met earlier in the talk. So I think this idea of that we need to seek out these nurturers. They're hard to find. There may be a professor like Tanushree in the faculty, or Anshu there, but whoever they are, try and find them. And if you find them, hold on to them and ask for them to really help you develop in the way that really nurtures your unique potential. So the last point I'm just going to close off today with is this idea that our parents are important forces in our lives. We would hold, when I was at Stir, we would hold parents' days where we would bring all of our young staff, ask their parents to come into the office once a year and have a chat to us and talk about what's on their minds, because there were so many concerns. Many of the people that worked for Stir as an NGO were some of the best graduates in the country. They came from the top universities. They could have been anywhere. And the parents were often very confused as to why were they working for an NGO, why were they going into the slums of Delhi or Chennai or any of these other places? Why couldn't they be in a normal corporate job? But I think just having time with them and helping to realize it was a good team, there was a bigger sense of purpose. It helped to really help. It helped to have a conversation between the parents and the young employees who worked in our organization in India. And the reason I say this is, I am a parent myself. This is my son. He's 9 now. And one thing I was very guilty of doing was that forcing my dreams on my son. And I'm a huge tennis fan. I'm often watching tennis on TV. I play a few times a week in normal times. I was watching the Australian Open on Sunday, and I really wanted to be honest, my son to be a great tennis player. And he was actually he plays decently. We played together, but we were getting onto tournaments and he just wasn't, passionate about it. So we had a bit of a heart-to-heart about it, not the calm waters that often is projected. There is no easy, simple path to stability. What's much more important is that we can ride these choppy waters, as we've had to do through this pandemic, and still thrive and flourish through that. So let me just recap the 5 things and we'll open up for Q&A. But the first idea, again, we talked about was this idea that just try and find that problem that you're deeply passionate about helping to solve. It will never be fully solved. It's a wicked problem, but you'll find a huge amount of purpose in your life if you devote yourself to that problem. It might be healthcare or education, or but an area that is so vast that there's huge human need, and where you can feel a real sense of purpose in helping and serving others. The second idea, again, is that it almost doesn't matter what you do, both really in terms of academic subjects or choices, or also in terms of extracurricular and also your social life more generally. What is important is that you engage in whatever it is you do, because we have very strong evidence that means you can transfer that engagement and that ability to learn to almost everything you want to do in your life. The third idea is that you are a talent owner and you are distinct. You've got a unique sense of strengths and purpose and potential. Own that and be distinctive. Don't just try and be like everyone else and a bit better. Try and find something that you really can do uniquely. The fourth piece is, find that person who will help you nurture that talent. It's hard to do it ourselves. Find that teacher, that professor, that boss, that mentor, that coach, and keep them. Find them and really help them. Ask them to help you get to a place you wouldn't have got to otherwise. And fifthly, when your parents talk about this world that was stable and calm, it's really nonsense most of the time. And maybe talk to them about their own lives and see if you can spot the patterns of the risks they took and how they were able to weather that storm, the stormy seas we saw in the picture, and get over that success narrative as well. So 5 ideas. I hope a few of these at least have resonated with some of you. But I'd love to open up and just see what thoughts, questions, reactions as well. And also just curious in terms of, does it change how you're thinking or feeling as well?